Hello. Okay, I think I'm coming through. Okay. All right. Now I just need to get this since this is a new media source, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should just be working. I don't know why it doesn't. There we go. All right. So I guess stream starting. They should be able to hear everything, and I'll just go with it. So, welcome to Understanding Bitcoin Source 20 Bugs and Security Vulnerabilities. So, Bitcoin is money for enemies. And what that means is Bitcoin is money for enemies because, regardless of what your opinions are in every aspect of life besides money, Bitcoin's system of incentives works best for everyone when transactions are pseudonymous and nodes are permissionless, right? The problem with this is that most nodes in the Bitcoin network are connected to peers that they don't know, but they assume are working in tandem to keep the network alive and running. The data received by other peers in the network are essential for the node to stay up to date with the blockchain and fulfill its purpose, but sometimes this permissionless connectivity and data transmission can lead to bugs. So the fact that it's so permissionless means that it's ripe for other attacks and whatnot to come through. So there's something called the CVE system. Have you heard of the CVE system before?
No, what's it stand for?
Have you heard?
Vulnerability something?
Uh, um, I mean, I have it. I actually don't remember.
Critical vulnerability environment? I don't know. That would be my
Yeah, no, I
guess.
think it's common.
Ex-
I have it here.
Common vulnerability.
Here, common vulnerabilities and
Okay.
exposures. So CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures and is a dictionary or glossary of vulnerabilities that have been identified for specific code bases. So this is quoted from NIST.gov. And under this program, security issues for various projects get assigned an ID from a federally funded nonprofit company called MITRE. I don't know if there's an easy way to say this acronym.
MITRE?
Yeah, maybe it's MITRE. I didn't look it up how to say it, but yeah, CVEs get assigned by MITRE or other MITRE authorized organizations called CVE numbering authorities or CNAs. And this website that I found online, exabeam.com, says the name is the creation of James McCormick, an early board member who wanted a name that meant nothing but sounded evocative. So, MITRE doesn't actually have like a meaning. That is the nonprofit's name. Also, I thought it was funny. It's like nonprofit, federally funded, so it's almost like a part of government in a way. And the various different government organizations fund, you know, the MITRE or
Yeah.
MITRE, if that's how you pronounce it. So, what do most CVEs revolve around? What do you think most CVEs revolve around in Bitcoin? Or, yeah, a good majority. And there's different ways you can classify CVEs. So, I've taken the liberty of
Spending?
classifying them.
Like spending false things? Transactions?
I wouldn't say spending most of the time. Luckily, security vulnerabilities tend to be trivial in a lot of cases. You have any guesses?
Oh, DDoS's?
Yeah, denials of service.
DOS.
Yeah. So it's like an abuse of communication, and I'll go into using the actual terminology of DOS or the denial of service, but it's abuse of communication that a lot of these issues come from. And it's funny, in any communication that happens between two parties, even human speech, what are some ways you can inconvenience the other party? So, what are things that annoy you maybe when talking to somebody?
You would overload their ears, I guess.
You would overload their ears, yeah.
They can't hear what I really want to hear. All I hear is like a jet noise blast.
Yeah, so if someone, like, if they're, are they still comprehensible, do you mean, or?
Like you're talking to me so loud that I can't hear what everybody else is saying.
Okay, if I'm
I
drowning
guess.
out other voices. Yeah, if I'm consuming all your attention, that is bad. So I would say that is an annoying thing about communication. Do you have anything? Anything that annoys you when talking to somebody else?
Spam. Nothing worse than spam.
Spam, just
Yeah.
like giving yeah, a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank,
You were
thanking
saying,
you and
yeah.
a bunch of stuff that's not real.
Right. So yeah, whether you pay attention to it, or even when you don't pay full attention to it, it's still annoying. Right. So I made a list of a pretty long list of things about abusing communication, and some of these apply to software. So when someone says the same thing over and over, so like redundancy.
Alright.
If I'm getting no new information and you keep telling me the same thing over and
That
over
guy
again.
that gives you the same story every time.
Yeah, like an old man who gives the same story every time. So when someone talks to me at the wrong time, so you know, I hate when I'm in the bathroom on the toilet. My mom might ask me a question, and that's not the best time to ask me. You know, there's a lot of hours in the day, so talking to me at the wrong time is pretty annoying. Um, when someone floods me with information I'm disinterested in, so not redundant, it could be new. I just don't care about the information. When someone gives me incorrect data to act on, so that is just misinformation. When someone asks for information that I'll have to expend work to answer, so that's kind of like what you were saying, where you have to give this person your attention because they're talking so loud that they're the only thing that you could hear. But I guess it's a little bit different because this requires a response from you or some effort to talk to the other person. And when someone wastes my time as they generate a response, so if I'm like waiting for somebody in person to respond to something that I inquired about, I also don't like that. Or if they prompted me to listen to them and then took forever. So here's how I'll group these in as the denial of service and irrelevant and malicious data. So a lot of these kind of sound like denial of service. It's when someone's taking my attention, they ask me to wait for the response and they take a while, or I have to expend some work. If you ask me a question, I have to do a lot of research to answer. Incorrect data kind of falls into the second one. The third one floods me with information I'm disinterested in. That's another way to take my attention away and deny the service that I can give to others. When someone talks to me at the wrong time, yeah, all these things could be denial of service type attacks. But an irrelevant and malicious data, I'd say, are a smaller amount of cases in terms of security vulnerabilities within Bitcoin Core. So denial of service, DOS. So denial of service vulnerabilities relate to communications that contain messages that are too much for us to process due to the frequency of the requests. So this is typically how denial of services work. This is not exclusively how you can perform denial of service attacks. It doesn't have to be, or I guess too much for us to process can mean different things. This could just mean some resource expenditure that we have to spend servicing somebody such that we can't service others. And 22 of the 40 CVs on CVEdetails.com scoped to Bitcoin are denial of service related. So I wanted to build some intuition about how vulnerabilities can arise or how you can catch them. And I can start off with this question, which is when a node is first initialized, what messages need to be exchanged? So I don't know if you guys know the first message. When I was looking at this question, I actually remembered my second understanding Bitcoin source. It was peer messaging, and I recently uploaded it on YouTube. So, but the first thing.
So that's the reference we need for this question?
Huh? Yeah, that's the reference you need.
Like a handshake or something?
There is a handshake of sorts.
With the other peers?
There is a handshake with another peer. And that handshake is, throwback to UBS, Understanding Bitcoin Source 2. First thing you send is like a version. So it's like, hey, this is, and part of this version message, you're kind of advertising the services that you support. And the other node will send version, and the idea is you start sending these like version acknowledgements. Okay, and how could version messages be abused? So if you're communicating information about like the services you support,
You could be lying, I guess?
you could be lying. Yeah, you could also like send a whole bunch of version messages. and start to, expend your resources. So I have this list. Version messages are used to communicate the features each node supports. Version messages can be sent even when a peer is connected, and there's no limit in the message processing code to how many can be sent. So it's not like they have a hard throttle on the versions that I can start sending to. There is a throttling mechanism that doesn't apply strictly to version messages, but the overall peer messaging system. But in terms of specifically receiving a certain type of message of version, there is no throttling mechanism for these specific type of messages. So there's no limit, and it's probably so I could actually send you 2 version messages, and you're not gonna reject it even though you're still connected to me. And I was trying to think of why that might be the case, and I put it's probably to allow renegotiation of some service or feature that I was declaring as part of my initial version exchange. Another way, or another thing I wanted to add was sending multiple version messages may cause one peer to take up all of a node's time, disallowing other peers to get messages through. This is more of like a theoretical thing. Again, there are other components of Bitcoin Core's code base such that I would probably not be able to overwhelm you with version messages. And we'll see why in the coming slides, but like theoretically, I could try and take up some resources by sending a whole bunch of version messages. So there is like a throttling on how many things are processed. And again, I'll go through that. So this can happen with any peer, thus messages must be throttled in terms of how many are processed at one time and how many queued messages we have from them from a memory perspective. So I don't want you sending me a whole bunch of things that I have to remember to respond to. So you need some kind of throttling mechanism for that. Even like for me getting these version messages and knowing that I need to send version acknowledgements. The solution processes multiple get data requests, which has its own throttling mechanism, but only one other type of request. So I can process certain requests for data, and Bitcoin Core kind of limits the other type of requests that I receive. And these are usually with peers that I'm already connected with and exchanging useful information with, like block headers and transactions. And I have this slide. So this is from Bitcoin Core, which we might look into after I finish these slides, but this is in process messages. It's method to, as it says, process messages. And here we see that there's certain mechanisms like this pause send. If this peer we've marked as like with this boolean as true of pause send, then we'll return out of this process messages and we won't do it. So in this process messages is scoped to another peer, a C node, that we call like P from. So things that we're getting messages from. And we have all these like conditions, but I wanted to look at this one. This is how we pull messages from the other peer. We call this thing called pull message, which kind of goes here, and this is pull message. And if you look here, we actually just take one message and we give it back to this pull result for that one message to get processed further on. And I wanted to say throttling process messages. So even here, we can see in process messages this other place. This is before the pull message, but when I was saying that you don't want to keep too many things queued up in terms of like your memory of what you have to do. So in process messages, we actually have this condition where if our get data requests were not empty with this exclamation mark, then we don't process any messages. So when people send us like get data requests, we try and fulfill all those get data requests before anything happens. Yeah. And once we like fulfill all those requests, then we can start processing new messages. But we have to make sure that we responded to all these old peers before we go and process new messages for this peer, at least. Everything's scoped to a peer and process messages. So one way we can limit the amount of pending messages is to stop processing new requests if we haven't filled all previous ones. So that is condition to process new messages here.
Is there a number of messages you can accept before you have to be like, everybody shut up, let me
Yeah,
process
there is
process
a
the-"
number, and I
Okay.
what yeah, I think I show it, and if not, we can look at the code
Okay.
base and we'll probably find it. Yeah, and this is last refactored by Neha, which is one of the people who teaches the MIT Bitcoin course. If you ever take a look at that one, with Taj, who's a co-inventor of Lightning Network, and I highly recommend watching their course because they put a lot more thought into each of their lectures. So eviction is another way. Nodes that aren't synced or like slow to respond will get evicted. So you have this idea that if certain peers aren't doing what you want them to do, then you'll just like kick them out, right?
All right.
And we see here, check the outbound peers have reasonable chains. Get time is used by this anti-DOS logic, so we could test this using mock time. And yeah, we make some checks. If can serve blocks, we look at the peer and blah blah. Then we pretty much have some like requirements that we have on them. Find X blocks download, background sync progress, and all these other things. But there are conditions in which case we will consider the eviction of a node. This is kind of where it's like invoked. This isn't the definition of consider eviction. But yeah, these are, well, yeah, this is something completely separate actually. This is just processing for get data. So we could also have extra peers. This I did show the definition for. We disconnect idle peers as well if they haven't given us as good information as other peers. So there's like an idea of like extra outbound peers. There's a default limit to the peers or the number of peers that we want to communicate with. And when we exceed this default limit, then we could start dropping peers, right? Or these extra peers. So if you have any extra block relay only peers, disconnect the youngest unless it's given us a block. In which case, compare with the second youngest, and out of those two, disconnect the peer who least recently gave us a block. So when we have extra peers, we have to start like looking at the newest connections and seeing if they're worthwhile. And we drop the ones that aren't, or the ones that haven't given us, good information or recent blocks. Youngest block relay only peer would be the extra peer we connected to temporarily in order to sync our tip. Note that we use higher node ID as a measure for the most recent connection. Okay.
Is a block relay only peer like doesn't give you transaction info, just the blocks or something?
Yeah, so
Okay.
they negotiate this during that version exchange at the beginning, or that
Okay.
handshake. So if we have more outbound full relay peers than we target, disconnect one. So again, we have these limits, right? Get extra block relay count, get extra full outbound count, and part of the definitions for these methods kind of exhibit the limits that we have on the type of nodes that we are willing to connect to. So now we have unexpected behavior. So not all vulnerabilities lead to a denial of service. Some just cause your node to exhibit unexpected behavior with undesirable consequences, like this CVE, which is injecting arbitrary data to like the debug log of your node by calling RPC method, or you have the Bitcoin knots CVE, which is officially like MITRE acknowledged, but it is scoped to Bitcoin knots when thinking about vulnerabilities. And
So that CVE is not a vulnerability in core.
it is not officially
Right.
marked as vulnerability in core, but as maintainer of Bitcoin knots, Luke can say that this is a vulnerability for my implementation or whatever.
I see.
In which case, he goes and he could fix it, which he has to the best of his ability through policy. And we'll take a look at that. Extra peers, I think this is just a clone slide. Or maybe one went up by accident. Yeah, so we're going to take a look at some Bitcoin CVEs, which should be enlightening and interesting, hopefully. I have the link right here. So, like, if you look at, I was going to show all the denial of service related things, but this is the most recent, it seems. All these IDs are associated with dates. So if I go to page 2, we should see very old ones from 2010. But let's go to page 1, and we can see this latest one. So this is the one that I was talking about with Bitcoin knots. Bitcoin Core through 26 and Bitcoin knots before blah, blah. Data carrier size limits can be bypassed by obfuscating data as code, exploited in the wild by inscriptions in 2022 and 2023. Although this is a vulnerability from the perspective of the Bitcoin Knots project,
Wait, what happened in 2022?
uh, inscriptions.
That was what, February, March 2023.
Well, Casey was playing around with inscription since before 2023, though.
Okay.
Like I know at 2022, Bitcoin Plus Plus, Casey was like showcasing his work there. So I imagine.
Was that like a vulnerability reference to like a specific test net, like, or like is the?
No, this is just acknowledging that from the perspective of Bitcoin Knots, this is a vulnerability, but it also includes some others consider it not a bug, just to show that there's some controversy surrounding this. Others are like memory management and protection issues in Bitcoin Core, allows attackers to modify the stored sending address, blah, blah. And one important thing I wanted to show is denial of service. This is how I got my account. I just kind of went through these and saw how many had denial of service in them. And as you can see, like quite a few, and this one has 10 more, because I think I said it has 22, yeah. And it's like interesting seeing what the first bugs were compared to the most recent bugs. So like this one, WX Bitcoin and Bitcoin D before 035 allow remote attackers to cause a denial of service via a Bitcoin transaction containing an op shift script opcode. So look at this is a daemon crash. So the first bug that was reported was something that would crash your node or stop your node from relaying transactions or blocks, either one of those, which I think is pretty like crazy. Another one is op check sig script opcodes. So in the past we had an issue with this thing called quadratic hashing, which is basically signing, or not signing, it's hashing things redundantly, which could cause your Bitcoin node to do more work than it needed to. And again, this would just cause your node to do work, which isn't expected or ideal. You'd think it was mining with the amount of work that you could give with certain check sigs. You have integer overflows, which are always pretty big as bugs. It allows attackers to bypass intended economic restrictions and create many Bitcoins via crafted Bitcoin transaction. So this bug is not very good. See, we even have these scores here. These are 5s and 7.5.
How do those scores get like presented?
Right here, or
yeah, EPSS score.
I don't know what the EPSS score is.
ESG score.
Yeah. I haven't looked too much into these scores, but you can see it published 2012, and there's usually some like time between when these things are identified and when these things are like published. Yeah.
So is that the identified typically would come with some disclosures, and then it doesn't get published until we've had like.
Right. There's usually some
time.
process of disclosure.
So where do you go to disclose something new before it gets published?
For something to get published, you have to typically like report it to this organization.
But that's not out there for everyone to see, right? Like when it first gets reported, it's in a.
Right. Well, when it's reported, you don't report it to the organization.
Okay.
You report it to the maintainers of the project.
Okay.
So you could go to Bitcoin Core as a repo, or I could go to it now and show you Bitcoin GitHub. Let's go here and see what's here. I think we have security. Oh, security critical. Maybe it's in security that read me here. Here we go. Reporting vulnerability. To report security issues, send an email to security@bitcoincore.org. So this is where you would responsibly disclose some vulnerability that you've identified that might, endanger the Bitcoin network. And we have this. The following keys may be used to communicate sensitive information to developers. So if you're really scared about a bug and you think it's going to be, world-ending, then you could go and use these PGP, like fingerprints, to make sure that your information gets transferred to the correct individual.
Well, what would you do with that? Like, compress your thing using that and make it so only
Or you could use somebody's PGP key to like encrypt, some information you only want them to see.
Okay. So using that fingerprint, you can encrypt stuff, and only Peter or whatever can.
Yeah, Peter Waller or
Okay.
Michael Ford or Ava Chow. Yeah, these are
All right.
in ways that you could verify that you're talking to the correct person. Yeah, has instructions on importing a key. All right. So yeah, this is responsible disclosure. Again, just wanted to scan through some of these bugs. Do not properly handle script opcodes in Bitcoin transactions, which allows remote attackers to spend Bitcoins owned by other users via unspecified vectors. I think this is like the it's a push data bug, I think. So I've spoken about in previous sessions how early Bitcoin had a bug in script. I want to verify that this is the same one before I talk about it. Attacker can spend. I think this is the push data one. Just want to make sure. Yeah. So there was a way for me to look at any UTXO and provide unlocking data that will get combined with the locking script, such that I ignore all of the locking script. I just steal the Bitcoin. Obviously, this is a very bad bug. If anyone can steal anyone else's UTXOs, but again, it's interesting to see these bugs arise because let me go back to it. This is in 2012. So this is 10, 11, 12, 3 years, right? Around 3 years after Bitcoin Core released, then we see this huge bug. I don't know what the spot price was in 2012, but if this was a bigger network like we have today, then this would definitely crash markets, right? So it also goes to show you how the level of security and the number of people who audit Bitcoin, so on and so forth, increases as the value increases to the societies that Bitcoin touches. So you could have this technology ending bug happening, or around let's say 2010 or published in 2012, and still have this thing go on. Yeah, again, I think this is given close to the data was found. So actually, if it's 2010, it's not that bad. If it's a year after. Yeah, so encrypt wallet vulnerabilities. Let's go back to the newer ones. Yeah, so we have things against like memory management and protection issues. Again, relating to making sure that other unauthorized individuals don't try and break, your resource consumption on your node. From also their own choosing, debug mode. All right, but that's enough from here. I wanted to show another list, one last list, and maybe I'll just cut this session short since we're going to do the LARP. So there's also these CVEs. So recently there was.
These are separate from that last list?
Yeah, these were bugs that I don't think were ever released or noted. Remember, there was this whole thing where they said they're going to release new CVEs or new security vulnerabilities. I don't know if they're actually given CVE IDs, but I can actually check.
So this could potentially be added to that list in the near future.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Going in. Talking bugs and vulnerabilities on Bitcoin Core.
Yeah.
Or Bitcoin in general.
Yeah, so I don't think any of these have been submitted to MITRE or have gotten CVEs. PNP. Yeah, so these were recently disclosed, and this was included in Bitcoin OpTech 310 on July 5th, 2024. But you had a whole bunch of these bugs. Antoine Poisson posted to the Bitcoin Dev mailing list a link to an announcement of 10 vulnerabilities affecting versions of Bitcoin Core that have been past their end of life for almost 2 years. And I know there was some debate about releasing these, but those who contribute to Bitcoin Core and maintain Bitcoin Core have asked people to upgrade because there's security patches that they might be missing that are really important. And they wanted to exhibit this by showing all these bugs that may not have been publicly disclosed or weren't, a lot of them weren't, so that to try and incentivize people to actually upgrade their
And is
nodes.
the upgrade mechanism, is it not based on consensus and it's pushed out laterally? Or
Well-
is it something that has to be manually and granular?
Well, for soft forks, those would be like affecting consensus, and in which case we'd all have to go and individually upgrade our nodes after there's certain like minor indications that they're willing to go pick up these type of transactions. But a lot of these security issues don't relate to consensus issues. They relate more towards policy issues or like issues on the level of peer communication with other nodes. And those you could just patch like unilaterally without like any consensus with other nodes. So all these are like implementation dependent. They're not part of the protocol or consensus. It's something wrong with Bitcoin Core, which is a case maybe for having multiple different Bitcoin implementations. Like a lot of people don't like Bitcoin Knots, which is a fork that's maintained by one of the core developers, Luke, and that one has different sets of policies that he applies, and maybe you would want to accept those because certain things Bitcoin Core, like their maintainers, will not see as bugs where in Bitcoin Knots would, like inscriptions.
Right.
Yeah, so Bitcoin Knots does recognize inscriptions as a bug, therefore they don't relay any transactions with inscriptions in
I
them.
didn't realize that there were so many different micro flavors.
Yeah, those are Bitcoin Core still dominates, but I'm running Bitcoin Knots right now on one of my other computers, and it's just good to try and diversify these implementations. So yeah, this is our remote code execution bug. So these are like really
That one
bad
sounds
bugs.
scary.
Yeah, universal plug and play. That's what this stood for, which is like interesting because in early Bitcoin talk, you could see Satoshi talk about like enabling this. So yeah, nodes had this enabled by default to allow them to receive incoming connections through NAT, network address translation. This is accomplished using the mini UPnPC library, which this guy discovered to be vulnerable to various remote attacks. Yeah, remote attacks are the worst, right? Because then people could steal your money. This was fixed in the upstream library. The fix incorporated into Bitcoin Core, and an update was made to disable UPnP by default. While investigating the bug, Bitcoin developer Vladimir J. Vanderlane discovered another remote code execution vulnerability in the same library. This was responsibly disclosed, fixed in the upstream library, and incorporated into Bitcoin Core 0.12, which was released in February 2016. So, yeah, this is what responsible disclosure looks like. You see something wrong in maybe a dependency that Bitcoin Core is using, you go and you tell the maintainer, and then they will go and try and
So
silently.
you go and whisper it in his ear.
Yeah.
While not broadcasting it for everyone. to
Right, exactly.
take
Yeah,
advantage of.
you let them know in a secure way. And before we were talking about this page on the Bitcoin Core repo, you have the security.md file. And for anyone who ever wants to report an issue, they can email security@bitcoincore.org and use these PGP key identifiers for, pretty much maintainers.
This is so above my head.
Uh,
Let me ask you a question. I mean,
Yeah.
it's related to this in a sort of first cousin distance. Those two MIT, I think it was brothers, that hacked or were able to extract value from the Ethereum blockchain. Is there something similar that this could be vulnerable for? Or
So that wasn't a security vulnerability per se. Those two guys, I believe that I'm thinking of the same
millions
thing.
of dollars that they took.
Yeah, but that was through something called MEV, which is a big topic in the Bitcoin space, which is like minor extractable value, which it's almost a given that certain things can be gamed in certain blockchains, and Ethereum being one of them. Bitcoin doesn't have this issue in the same way that Ethereum does, but there's ways for people who are able to organize transactions into blocks to extract value in ways unintended by like the participants.
Right.
So in Bitcoin, for example, the way that miners extract value is you attach like a fat fee to your transaction, and you're like, but you know that the miner is gonna choose your transaction and put it first because they know they want to make the most money, and you want to get your transaction confirmed quickly. But with like MEV, there's ways, or a pretty big thing, or probably the biggest instance of MEV was front running. So like in Ethereum, because you have contracts, I can order certain things that would be to my benefit in ways that you may not have known about. So there's a like Uniswap, which is a DEX. You could say you want Apple Coin, and I see that you want Apple Coin, and you have a certain amount of slippage, let's say, on your execution order. So
What is
I will
slippage?
go,
Oh.
or like the tolerance for variability in.
Okay.
Plus or minus
Like you're doing a
transaction
market
fees.
buy.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like a market buy. Yeah. So.
Like just buy it right now. I don't care what price.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I see that, and I
Well, it's
swindle
usually
in there.
constrained at some like
Yeah,
it's not like unlimited, but yeah, there's some like constrained variability in the amount that you're willing to pay for a coin. So a miner would just buy up the coin that you're trying to buy and resell it to you at like a higher value,
Right.
and order your transaction to come after theirs.
Right.
In which case they can extract value. Bitcoin,
okay.
yeah, we don't really have dexes.
So,
and-
so they would see that you're trying to buy it, realize that it's 100% guaranteed that you intend to get
Right.
it, so they buy it first and then just hand it sideways to you
yeah.
at the marginal
They
difference.
pay a higher fee than you did, then they get in first, I guess.
Well, they don't need to pay a higher fee if they're the people who are constructing the blocks, right?
Oh, okay.
If they're constructing the blocks,
Right.
that's the advantage.
Yes, that's the whole thing
That's
with
the miner.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's morally reprehensible.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I don't know, like, I guess if that is like the worst thing in the world. Things are naturally tend to go this way when you have expressive contracts that like don't have any. There's restrictions in Ethereum, but like maybe not well thought out restrictions. Then yeah, it's bound to be gamed by these miners. Now, sure, it's like more. It could be morally reprehensible to some because the participants aren't knowledgeable of this mechanism,
Right.
and it's like unintended.
And
But
if you don't know about it,
right,
it's painless, but it
Right.
happens and it benefits.
yeah, it's just something that happens, right?
Okay.
But there are certain ways that you can make your contract to try and combat this, and there's also certain ways to make your contract to like be able to include this. So if like you're a miner and you're making a contract, maybe you're going to design it in such a way that you know you can extract more value than the participants in your system. Yeah, and MEV has been an issue in terms of like security, like bring it back to vulnerabilities, because the Bitcoin community has been thinking about including more expressive opcodes in their scripting language, which would enable covenants. And covenants would allow you to have scripts that aren't quite as robust as like a smart contract would be on Ethereum with Solidity, but it does give you more robustness than what is available right now. And a lot of people have been very cautious of covenants. I'm not one of those people. I'm pro covenants. I want more robustness on Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin developers typically approach things the right way. Even with the MEV issue, there's a popular Bitcoin developer named Matt Corallo who's like put a lot of thought into how this might happen, and he's been properly refuted in my opinion. But it is something that's on Bitcoiners' mind, and even though the system might allow it, they know that like, hey, how can we design future development such that we don't open up avenues like this to exploit users in ways that they might not understand?
Yeah. Unless you're neck deep in it, you wouldn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think all these are like very interesting in the context of Bitcoin development and thinking about security and what security means in terms of users, like, which is protecting them from unintended consequences, whether it's at the node level in terms of like your policy or talking to nodes. You want to be able to protect users who are essentially hosting the nodes because they're the infrastructure of your network. Right? Bitcoin has such high availability because all these like individuals around the world are running Bitcoin nodes, and you don't want them to be at risk because if one's at risk, multiple are at risk, and the whole network
Correct.
in a way is at risk of.
Right. So what is your intention of being a Bitcoin node host? Is it you do it for the additional robustness of the network, or based out of curiosity, or because
It's
it makes money for you, or
yeah. I can. I think it's a lot of helping the network, but also if you have any funds on Bitcoin, like if you have a wallet, then you also want to verify for yourself that the funds that your wallet is saying that you have are actually there, of whatever wallet you use.
okay.
And I'd
But
say
is that not like just an address that you can put up and search for?
you could put it on the block explorer, but you're trusting whoever's hosting that block explorer. When you're on a Bitcoin node, it's verifying that all the blockchain has like as much work as like you might think it would have. Because now, like if you host your own node, if other nodes try and cheat you with different information about the blockchain, your node will reject it because if it's seen another blockchain with more work, it knows that's the valid one. So it's doing more validation that you can audit because it's on your machine versus like going to a website where they're doing the validation for you and you can't really audit what's happening on their servers. So they could be lying to you.
Opens up, yeah, that potential attack vector.
Yeah.
Like here's my node, I can connect to it, and I have mempool, but it's running my node, like what my node sees. So like my node is looking at all of these blocks and transactions. So I don't have to go to mempool like their website. I can go to like my specific node and see all that.
Yeah, it's
And
open
if
source.
I want to relay my, if I want to when I broadcast my transactions, I use my node. That way I don't like somebody else doesn't know who I am.
Also, not a chance of, or there's a smaller chance of censorship in this way as well, because if you put it to the authentic mempool.space, I mean, they wouldn't do this and haven't done it, but theoretically, if they were malicious, they could just stop your transaction from broadcasting. If that was your only means
Right.
to broadcast
If they
transactions.
get pinched or aggressively approached by OFAC or like
Yeah.
that, you know, like only this, so the censorship resistance by distributing everybody's operating their own node, has their own mempool.
Yeah.
Like it aligns with the censorship resistance.
Also, you could obfuscate the IP address that your transaction broadcasts from. If you run a node, it's like harder to identify. Whereas if you go to mempool.space and you broadcast your transaction, like they will start associating your IP with like whatever computer you use, the internet you use to access the website, and they can log that and like keep it, you know, forever theoretically.
For future reference. So
Right.
like whether it's Ofcom or the Americans, or they could try to sideline the, I guess, Russian side of the infrastructure
I mean,
type things, or I don't know, try to hamper their transactions.
yeah, you could censor people, so, you know.
Right. Somebody
Mempool.space generally wouldn't. They're like a good site, so I want to be clear that this is like all in theory. That this could happen, like you know, if they were taken over by a malicious entity or hacked,
Right.
and all this other information. But I think they have like very responsible policies with respect to how long they keep users' data of like IP addresses and logs. So even if somebody came and tried to audit them and get certain information out, they wouldn't have it to give to them.
Because it's not required to keep.
Right. And if they kept it, you know, it makes them this risk of like, you know, treasure trove of information.
Of course, a honeypot.
Right. So they have, you know, policies to like say, hey, we're not going to collect that, you know, too much data.
Our official policy is we don't collect it, so don't come scratch it.
Right. Exactly.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, all these things kind of like contribute to like maybe wanting to run your own node and where you can guarantee the security of like your infrastructure, because maybe they run a Bitcoin Core node and they're never going to lie to you and they say we're running a certain version. But if they run an old version, maybe one of these that have security vulnerabilities, there's ways that they could be lied to because someone's attacking their node where they didn't, and because they were lied to, they lie to you. But this is unintentional from them, right? So they're now subject, you know, to certain attacks.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So even if they're an honest party, if they're running a node that has a security vulnerability and they get attacked in a way such that they no longer receive correct information, they can unintentionally give that to you and you know, screw with all their users. So that's kind of the importance I was trying to convey by showing all these security issues and like the vulnerabilities, and you know, some of these are just like straight up bugs, like us telling people like before, like this bug would crash a node and then one bug allowed anyone to spend anyone else's coins. Back in the
That's wild.
back in the early days, right?
12,
Yeah, it was like a 12 like publication, which I think the bug was 2010, which is about a year after the Bitcoin was released. So a lot of the really bad bugs were caught and fixed before Bitcoin started accruing all this value and becoming this super important global monetary network.
Do you realize when you look at the timeline for when these major hacks happened, Mt. Gox specifically, shortly after Mt. Gox, you started to come out with all of these self-custody ledgers.
Yeah.
It wasn't there before Mt. Gox.
Yeah, self-custody became a lot more important because they saw the risk of custodying their funds.
That issue bubbled to the surface when 850,000 BTC went missing.
Yeah, or if FTX even, you saw
that's like,
a rise in
that's
self-custody.
Recent. That's
Yeah,
practically yesterday.
yeah, and we're still seeing like these issues with having custody Bitcoin, and slowly but surely we're getting more people to start moving their coins off exchanges and be their own banks, and we're having more secure mechanisms to custody your Bitcoin, like AnchorWatch, which is a company for a collaborative company, or custody. I think right now targeted for companies. But there's things like Liana, of course, Green, which
So let me ask you a question. This is purely a theoretical question. How would someone give an American who has tax obligations to Uncle Sam, how would those coins be received to not put your head up and be noticed, theoretically?
So if you're saying if an individual wanted to like escape tax obligations,
If an individual was owed Bitcoin and didn't want to highlight themselves as being the owner
yeah.
of said Bitcoin, how would they obfuscate that?
Oh, the best way to do that. I mean, there's a couple different ways.
Mixers or
Right.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah. You use something like a coin join. Yeah. But the question that you're asking is like fundamentally of financial privacy, right?
Well, it's a
Having
tax evasion
Uh,
question.
okay, but the tax evasion is like, I mean, to some, maybe more of like the malicious subset of what privacy could give to people in general. But it's essentially not having your funds tracked.
Right.
Yeah, and the privacy mechanisms in general of trying to like escape observance usually are things like mixers or coin joins, or just having a Bitcoin economy going, where like I'll pay somebody else in Bitcoin and like they'll pay me and that person pays somebody else. So I'd say
But
that
you know all those wallets are being logged somewhere.
right, in which case you could use like your own Bitcoin node and run it over Tor, which is another like reason that you might want to run your own node, right? Or like him, he just said he has a remote connection to his server at home, so like that's secured over TLS typically. So he gets to have that like all that traffic be encrypted.
Right.
So it's not like
on this node, wherever it is, this computer, is it virtual or is it a physical unit?
I have a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, it was like a $200 Raspberry Pi, and I have an SSD I attached to it, and then it's hooked up to my router.
yeah. There's a whole bunch of products like Start9 or Umbrel that you could use to go and be self-sovereign and not have to rely on others.
Or just an old computer, you plug it into your router.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that you could go and try and like pretty much like be self-sovereign or not have to have like anything spied upon.
Right.
And have a currency that's clearly disconnected from the monetary issuance of any one government, which is very favorable in the Bitcoin world.
Did y'all know that there's a private group on LinkedIn where you can promote whatever you do, whatever your specialty is, and get paid in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. There's a lot of communities online that you can go and transact for, like, if I wanted to.
Is it like a job posting?
Yeah.
LinkedIn is an official LinkedIn group that you can go and say, I run X type of
Yeah.
servers or financial consultation or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you open yourself up to for the person who wants a service to contact you and initiate a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sphinx has those.
Oh yeah,
Called
six.
Sphinx. I
Yeah, we
did
have
that.
bounties, right?
Yeah.
In especially in software engineering, you have people who are offering bounties for completing tasks related to software. So if you contribute to my project, then I will give you some like Bitcoin, or you could have things like Fund Solver, which is something that's maintained by the Open Source Justice Foundation.
Fund solver.
Yeah, and their project is having bounties for everything. So
Okay.
theoretically, it could be people in your area, like mowing your lawn, but otherwise, it could be like, hey, I want a research report written on blah blah. Here is the bounty for it, which is 1,000,000 sats. You know, and then you could ask for that, and people will give you that research report, and then you pay the sats out to them. And there's, plans have adjudicators who maybe have great reputation and may be distributed across
So
countries
the-
and so on and so forth.
So there would be the adjudicator would be the one to make the determination of whether the task was
Right.
completed or not. An impartial entity.
Right, and that's like
Okay.
the goal, right? The dream.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's all with the Bitcoin economy and staying private and
That's all.
yeah.
Are we done with the slides? We gotta.
Yeah. I'll go in. Is there a question?
Yeah, did we finish all the slides?
Yeah. All the slides are done. I was just looking over security vulnerabilities. So yeah, I'll probably end now since we're gonna do the LARP.
Okay.
So I'll end this stream. But thanks for anyone who tuned in, and
Next
yeah.
episode is finale.
Yeah, the next one will be the last one. Understanding Bitcoin Source 21. At least for this season 1, I might do a season 2 of it. So stay tuned. The next session is going to be on randomness and how that's generated.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks for joining
Ooh,
everyone.
I'm on the video feed.
You are.
Big time.